Hello, YouTube. So I'm gonna record another video now, and I'm not sure that this is gonna be anything, but I'm just gonna talk for a bit and see what comes out of this, and if it goes where I think it's gonna go, I'll post it, but we'll see. Bear with me. So I wanted to talk a bit about non-binary identities. My last video that I talked about how my gender identity has tended to sort of stabilize, and that's sort of an emergent property of the way that my life is shaped right now. It just is what it is, and I still tend to call myself a non-binary trans woman or a bigender trans woman because my relationship and experience with my gender and my body and the society has a lot in common with binary trans women. So I've sort of just jumped to there. So one of the things I think that one of the things that had come up in the BBC radio interview was sort of this idea of gender as we conceive of it in our society being a function of sort of Western Euro imperialism as a general role, and how outside of that Western Euro-American imperialist, colonialist type sphere of influence, other cultures have multiple genders beyond man and woman, and I think some of the ones that had been mentioned are like the Whāwhāwhine in Samoa and Katui in Thailand, and God help me if I'm pronouncing that wrong, I'm sorry. And the Hijra in India, and Mux in Mexico, and Two-Spirit in Native American nations, which is an umbrella term for various non-binary or non-man-woman identities in different tribes, because white people, we like to put everything together, so we just call them, we just lump them together as if they were all one thing, but Native American people seem to have landed on Two-Spirit in English as a way to refer to that. By the way, if you're white, don't you ever fucking call yourself Two-Spirit. That's a rule. Don't do it to me. I will not hear it. I'm fine with you calling yourself bigender or gender fluid or non-binary or whatever, but Two-Spirit, that's not ours. We've taken enough away from Native Americans. I don't think we need to take that one. Okay, small rant over. So I was asked, why does it seem like non-binary people are being more visible now in Western culture, such as it is? And what I had told the presenter and the interviewer that I don't think made it to air was that I think the fact that gender functions differently outside of it, outside of Western culture, outside of this Christian influenced man-woman binary model, is because it's a feature of humanity. It's something that exists naturally as a part of humanity's need to come together and create tribes and families and clans and social structures. Gender is something that always ends up with a social role, or some function in a society, in a culture, and we have restricted it to this very small function of identifying your breeding capability, really, in Christian influenced Euro-colonial societies. And I think in other cultures it serves different functions, and so that's just sort of an emergent property of humanity. It's just a way that human beings operate. And I think what's finally happening, and maybe this was somewhat referenced in the article, I think what's happening is that because of the internet, which I think is the most transformative development in humanity's entire history, the ability to connect with somebody who has a similar experience with you across the globe in ways that you couldn't have 20 years ago has revolutionized the way that our society functions. And I think it's, small ways and big ways, like access to information, right? I get very excited about the internet and what it's done, but like, you have millennia where there's no way to like really transmit information except orally. So then writing systems develop, but even then, like, nothing lasts to really, convey information. So like you get like stone tablets and eventually like papyrus and paper, but the problem is you can only still convey that information as long as someone's looking at that particular document, and so that physical thing has to move from person to person in order to transmit that information. Eventually, you got the printing press is developed in China. Then Europeans invented again in the 1400s. So now you have books. So now you can have multiple copies of this information, and it's distributed out. So as long as you can read, you have access to this knowledge. Like, that's pretty great. And then, but the thing is, you still have to be literate. You still have to hold something in your hand. But it begins, mass media. After books, we get newspapers and pamphlets, and so now you're spreading out information. Someone still has to physically hold it, but again, multiple people are now able to access the same information, as long as they're literate. So, now it's like the dissemination of information happens much faster, like faster and faster. Then you get the telegraph, so now you can transmit information over long distances, and, newspapers can print the same story, right, on opposite coasts of a continent. Like, that's huge. Then you get, the telegraph, you get the telephone, so now you can actually transmit, like, your own voice. You can talk to somebody else across the country, across the world, radio, and now you have, like, real mass media. Radio and television come out. Now you're broadcasting information to millions of people at one time, and they're all consuming it, and they're not required to be literate. Like, this is huge. But all of these things still have this centralized store of information that is pushed out. So that means there's people who can choose what information you see, what information you don't see, what information gets preserved, and what information gets hidden. Like, it's very centralized. There's no check on that, really. So, the archivist becomes sort of all-powerful. And then the internet comes. Now you've decentralized all of this knowledge. Now every human has access to all human knowledge, potentially, right? Some literacy is still required. Certainly, cyber literacy is required, the ability to go out and get that information. But now people can connect with other people who, like, trans people were only able to connect with other people through, like, back pages of, sort of scandalous magazines, right? Or zines, or, like, secret letters or secret mailing lists. And so then with the internet, we get, like, trans BBSs and trans email lists and trans e-groups, which, went to Yahoo groups. And, like all of this connection starts happening, and now, like, you found this video. I'm a trans woman speaking to you, and you don't have to read what I have to say. Nobody controls what I say, except for me, and bless your hearts if you're actually paying attention, through my rambliness. But it's the most transformative thing that's ever happened to humanity. Okay. So, why do I think non-binary people are sort of making ourselves known now? Because so much time was spent in this Western dissemination of culture and enforcement of culture and enforcement of binary gender that it suppressed all of those things that would have emerged as non-binary gender functions or roles or identities in our society that would have evolved or emerged in similar ways to, the role of the two-spirit person in a tribe or the hijra role in India. And they're oppressed, but they have also a social function that's unique to them. And, there's all of this, other stuff, right? And a lot of the oppression of these non-binary genders comes because of this Western imperialist influence, and it's terrible. This Christian notion of binaries everywhere, good and evil, God and Satan. Satan's not in the Bible in the way that we conceive of him today, so we had to create him, right? The Judaistic traditions that Christianity emerged out of don't have a hell or an afterlife the way that we have it in Christianity. I say we, I'm an atheist, but that's how I was raised, was as a Christian. If the devil didn't exist, we'd have to create him. And this, strict enforcement of a man is this, and a woman is this, and a man has this role and responsibility, and a woman is this and has this responsibility, and deserves pain and punishment because of Eve, and all of this other stuff. That has influenced these other cultures that we've come in contact with and conquered, and God, white people are so shitty. I swear, we're awful. As in numbers, we're terrible. So now that people can sort of be whoever they want to be online, now that they can connect with people who have similar experience to them, now that this centralization has started to dissipate, centralization of power and oppression and definition and knowledge, now that that's disseminated much more freely and more person to person, peer to peer, I think now all of the people who would have been in these other roles, if they existed in, Euro-derived cultures, are starting to come out and we're saying, hey, we're here. We don't fit in with this stuff that you have required of everyone before, we don't have to live in secret. And I think that's why we're seeing such a revolution now with trans people being visible and listened to, and that knowledge about trans people and trans lives being something that can be depicted as the undercarriage of a whole television series, Transparent turns on Mora's transition and how that affects her family. And one of the things I hate most about that show is that while the lead character is Mora, the whole story is always about her kids and her family and how her transition has impacted them and how they have to cope, right? What I've seen of Boy Meets Girl, it's just treated as a fact of Judy's life. She's just a trans woman, so that has certain ways that it impacts her life, but mostly it's just her and Leo dating, and the foibles of dating with Leo's family, who are sort of, odd in their way, and Judy's family, who's sort of odd in their way, but her being trans is just a fact of the character, it's just a part of her history, but it's not the whole reason that, it's not that every plot exists. The second episode, the one that we watched is, both of their families end up in this pub and having a meal together, and there's all of this sort of goofy interaction that happens. There is, this sort of sub-thread of, well, is now when Judy comes out to Leo's family, or not? When does that become, sort of the topic? But really, it's, them trying to make these two families have this conversation, and they come from different backgrounds. I think the biggest difference is class. There's a class difference, perhaps, or an education difference. And so that causes issues, right? But it's not just, Judy's a trans woman, oh God, now everything's going to fall apart and it's terrible. There's a bit of tension about, when they're going to find out what their reaction's going to be, but that's not the entirety of the plot. By the way, watch the damn show, is what I'm saying. But I think it's a facet, that's a reflection of this idea that, trans people have always existed as part of humanity. And as a corollary, non-binary people have always existed as a facet of humanity. And it's only now that we can't be held down anymore because the internet exists. And, we're able to tell our stories and not have them be censored by cis people, right? And we can navigate this sort of media landscape now where we can get our stories out there, usually via cis people, but we can still tell our stories. And the more we tell our stories, the more complex stories we can tell, and the more we can sort of, be ourselves. So why is it happening now? Because they can't stop us anymore. That's really the answer. So like, subscribe, comment down here. All of my contact information is in a block in the comments, or in the show notes. Feel free to reach out to me, send me questions, and I will answer them. I think this is the last video I'm going to make in this spot, in these clothes, today. And it looks like the sun is starting to go down, so I'm losing my awesome lighting, too. But, yeah, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching my ramble, and thanks for staying with me through all of the quiet periods and through all of the sort of ups and downs lately. I really appreciate it. All right, lovelies. Bye.